Good morning, everybody. This is Donna Newbury. I'm the chair of Wellbeing Australia, and we are thrilled today to welcome Lisa Cox to share her stories with us. And Lisa, we've heard so much about the amazing journey that you've had. Would love you to just introduce yourself to our attendees, and can't wait to hear your story. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. I love public speaking, but even more so to awesome people like yourselves, first responders. So I've had a bit to do with first responders. I'm not one myself, but I've certainly met a lot of you. I'll take you through a bit of my own personal story and how I suppose, come to deal with some of the challenges that life has thrown my way. So very, very briefly, I've put this here as a trigger warning. Some of the images, only a few, really no biggie, might be a bit uncomfortable for some people, so just me. But I thought I'd throw that in just in case if some of you want to put the screen off for a little while. So from living hell to living well, that's what I've called this presentation, and I suppose all you can see on your screen is my head. So I thought I'd start by showing you a few more photos of the rest of me. So this is me with my prosthetic leg at the gym, same thing again, and I'm now in a wheelchair full time. And there's another one of me looking like an absolute goose, so I thought, why not throw that in too? But things were very different 16 years ago. This was me at the Melbourne Cup. I wasn't in a wheelchair, didn't have a prosthetic leg, with my brother and sister. Roughly 4 months after this photo was taken, I had a brain hemorrhage, went into a 3-week coma and was on life support for 2 months. So it was a Streptococcus A infection that caused my brain to hemorrhage and collapsed at the airport. It was all a bit frantic. And obviously I met a couple of lovely first responders that day. Don't remember them or the numerous ones that I met afterwards, but I certainly have met a few in my time. So just a really quick snapshot of what happened, and this won't be relevant to everyone, but for those of you who are first responders in the healthcare sector, brain hemorrhage, 3-week coma, 2-month life support, complete organ failure, pneumonia, MRSA, and in a hyperbaric chamber for a couple of times. My right toes, left leg, and 9 of my fingertips were all amputated. So I still have this one left, which comes in really handy for opening cans of soft drinks and everything. But I've had heart surgery twice, a total hip replacement. So all the things that happen to elderly women have happened to me in my early and mid-20s. But more importantly, I suppose, and I say more importantly because they're all of the visible disabilities that you can see. You can see my wheelchair, my prosthetic leg, but it's all of the invisible disabilities and challenges that I have going on because of the scarring on my brain that are far bigger than, or have a far greater impact on my life than a wheelchair or a prosthetic leg. So I'm over 25% blind, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, but I also have clinically diagnosed PTSD, health anxiety, and generalized anxiety. So coronavirus was horrible for everyone, don't get me wrong, but when you have health anxiety, coronavirus has been a nightmare for me because I'm already a clean freak and don't need anything else to set me off. So that's a very brief overview of what happened. But that's the trigger warning I was talking about. All of my bits and pieces before they were amputated. I guess as first responders, a lot of you see some really horrible things happening to other people. But in my case, I saw some really horrible things that were happening to me. So that wasn't necessarily better or worse. It was just, I suppose, a different perspective on my version of PTSD and my mental challenges that I had to overcome. So from a living hell to living well. a lot of shit has gone down. I do apologize if I swear, but you can't really talk about these sorts of things without dropping a few swear words occasionally. It's been bullshit what happened, but at the same time, no word of a lie, I love my life today, and I want you to realize that there is a way to manage, not necessarily cure or fix, but there are ways for each individual to manage these sorts of challenges that they have in their day-to-day life. So I'd like to talk through a few of those with you now. And the first has been discovering or rediscovering your passions outside of work. So depending on what sort of first responder you are, I know there's a really wide variety of you here, but you put on that uniform or you go and do your thing, whatever that may be, and there is a life outside of what you do in uniform. So for me, for example, I had to rediscover my passions, what really brought me joy, lit me up outside of stability and hospital and all of those sorts of things. So in my personal experience, it was writing. Now, I know some of you are just going to yawn and go, you're crazy. Writing, what? It's what my husband does. He thinks I'm nuts. But I love writing. I could sit at the computer all day if my chronic fatigue allowed. But that's the sort of thing that really lights me up and brings me joy and distracts me, I suppose, from all of the shit going on up here if I'm just typing away. And that's going to be different for all of you. So my husband loves cooking. Some of you may love that. You find your own thing, I suppose. That's the one thing I really do want to stress throughout this presentation. There is no one size fits all or one way to do things. So I'll tell you about my experiences and what has really worked in my opinion, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be your thing and it's going to work for you. And I do encourage each of you to go out there and explore those options. Don't be afraid to fail. I failed miserably so many times finding ways to manage stress and anxiety, but it's only through those failures that I finally got to a place where I was managing it and found something that does work for me. So the second was to find others who are where you want to be and mirror their behaviour. So by that I mean we often think of role models as something for the teenagers or the young kids, and you can be 40, 50, 60 and still have a role model. And all that means is somebody who you look up to and go, they've got their shit together. I want to be more like that. You don't have to tell them or pull them aside and go, hey, mate, you're my role model. Don't have to do any of that, but mirror their actions. If they're doing something that perhaps you could do better, doing exercise instead of drinking to manage stress, that's just one example. Take that on board and go, okay, that's probably what I need to be doing. So there have certainly been people in my life who I've brought on as my role models, but I didn't tell them that at the time. When I first found out all of my leg, my toes, fingers were going to be amputated, I was a mess, absolutely miserable. Psychologists, psychiatrists, the very best professionals couldn't calm me down. But someone called Phoebe walked into my room one day and I thought, you bitch, what do you know about amputations? But she sat down, explained to me that she'd had 2 legs amputated below the knee, 1 arm, and her other hand was like mine with missing fingertips. She could only see out of 1 eye. Now, my whole world changed from that day on, and I began mirroring what Phoebe had done to recover or get past her challenges. So I realized that's very different to what a lot of you are experiencing. You don't necessarily have or need a Phoebe type person in your life, but the point is to find that role model and really mirror their positive behaviours. Surrounding yourself with the right sort of people. Now, this has been a real game changer for me. So I'm just going to make a hypothetical situation here now. So this hasn't been my experience and it may not be yours, but it's purely a hypothetical. Let's say you're really battling with mental health, PTSD is out of control, and your solution is to see your mates who are all heavy drinkers. They've all got the same issues and they're all drinking heavily to deal with it. That's not a good mix. You need to be surrounding yourself with the sort of people who aren't going to encourage that behaviour. So when I wanted to get out of a really dark spot or a really dark place, surrounding myself with lots of other people who are also in really dark spots and really dark places and perhaps didn't deal with their mental challenges in the best way, that wasn't great for me. It really wasn't. So each of you needs to find something that works for you and perhaps look at the circles you surround yourself with, because you probably heard the saying that you're the average of the 5 people you associate with. So I was very fortunate to have mum, dad, my sister and my brother, both younger than me, but they became my older sister and brother in many ways, looking after me during that first year in hospital until I regained my independence. And now I'm still very careful about people I do bring into my life, and I call them toxic people, toxic friends, toxic influences, who perhaps may, for example, use alcohol to deal with poor mental health circumstances. They're not the sorts of people I personally want to have in my close circle, because it's not great for me. And I know that after many years of trial and error. So seeking the right help, and that can be anonymous if needed. Now, I say seeking the right help because I'm going to speak a little bit later about integrative health and mental health help. And as I mentioned before, there is no one size fits all, and no, this is what works and this is what you must do. If yoga and meditation are your thing, go nuts. Go if that's what works for you. If it's something else, great. But I know I felt like a huge failure for years and years and years, because I had these mental health challenges. I couldn't meditate, I couldn't do yoga, and I couldn't drink green tea because it tasted revolting. And everyone around me was saying, "Oh, you need to be calm and meditate." That was horrible. So as it turned out, I had to drink coffee, go to the gym, lift some weights, and that's my way of coping, or that's my way of dealing. And it's been great for me, along with specialist interventions. So the reason I talk so openly all the time about my own mental health challenges is that I want to reduce the stigma around people being afraid to bring it up and talk about things like PTSD and anxiety and depression and those sorts of things. So I'm on medication for my anxiety, and I have no problems talking about that. And that's why I mention things like integrative healthcare. Some of the help I needed early on, I can now brush my own teeth, I'm proud to say. But integrative wellness means that, or for me anyway, combining the two ends of the spectrum, whatever works for you. So in my case, that's lifestyle interventions like going to the gym, and I can't run anymore, but also medication, combining those two. For you, it might be just yoga and meditation, or just medication, whatever works for you. Trial and error to find your fit. I cannot stress enough, don't be afraid to fail if you don't get it right straight away. I tried for a very long time and I couldn't be happier now, because I finally found a fit for me. And in years to come, when my circumstances change and I get older, I'm 40 now, but that may change again. That's life. So look at all of these things, whether it's medication, lifestyle interventions, talking anonymously to a GP, to a psychologist, a psychiatrist. There is no shame in that. Think of it as a tool, purely a tool. You can't build a house without tools. You can't build whatever you're trying to build without tools. So in my early days, I had walking frames and prosthetics and all sorts of other attachments, which were my tools to get me up and moving. These days it's my wheelchair. But I also consider things like counselling with my psychologist to help me work through my health anxiety, my PTSD. That was a tool, and it was so beneficial. I cannot tell you enough how great it was for me. Finding your happy place and going there often, that's been another game changer for me. And again, it's going to be different for everybody. I don't recommend that your happy place be the pub. For me, my happy place is the gym. It's sitting on the couch in pajamas with my husband. Really boring stuff like that. But they're my happy places. Your happy place might be if you've got a park nearby, whatever it may be. My mum's happy place is just sitting in the car, out in the trees, watching birds. It's going to be different for everybody. But having those little things, you think, oh, that's nothing. That's just one small part of it. But the point is that when we have lots of small things that come together in a day, we suddenly fill a day with a lot more than it being a really uncomfortable, upsetting day. So that, as I said before, is my happy place. At the gym, I'm there most mornings. I was there this morning at 4, and that's normal for me. That's how my sleep cycle works now. I'm up early, but I'm an old person and in bed by about 7. So what is your off switch? Now, that's a question I'm putting to all of you, because you often hear about, fighting your off switch, and that can be really bloody hard. And I say that as someone who finds it really bloody hard to turn off. So I'm one of those annoying people on holidays or on a Sunday morning who is up at 4 and says, right, what are we doing? Where are we going? I can't calm very easily. So my off switch, however, has been really shitty reality TV. Seriously, I know that sounds silly, and you might roll your eyes. It's not very highbrow viewing. I get that, but I spend so much time working in the mental health space with disability, people who have really challenging life circumstances. I see and hear about some absolutely horrible things, as I'm sure many of you would. I work on social justice, those sorts of really big issues that mean by the end of the day, I'm mentally drained. I can't even make basic decisions about what I want for dinner. But shows like this, switch off. Maths or The Bachelor or something might not be your thing, but again, I'm only bringing you my what works for me, my examples. So maybe nature documentaries or David Attenborough is your thing. I don't know. You guys know what your off switch is, but again, don't be afraid to fail and try again. It took me a little while to work out what my off switch was, and not listening to all of the other voices telling me what it should be. So I had a lot of people, random people, telling me that I should be meditating and doing yoga and drinking green tea to find my off switch, to be calm. And that works for some people, which is fantastic. If it does work for you, that's great. But it didn't work for me. So as I mentioned before, I felt like a huge failure at first, but don't ever feel like a failure if it doesn't work for you and you have to try something else and then try again. Now, what does self-care look like to you? Another question that I pose, because often in the wellnessy space, I'm speaking very broadly here, self-care can mean organic chocolate, bubble bars, and images like this of peace and tranquility. And that's great for some people, as I've said so many times before, but it might not be for you. It might not be for everyone. This right here is my idea of hell. Sitting still on a mountaintop, get me to the gym, give me some weights and some loud music and plenty of coffee. That is my idea of self-care. So I really do want to stress that there's no one size fits all here when it comes to managing mental health challenges like PTSD and anxiety and all the other things that come with the great work that you guys do. So I'll leave this up for a second. Helping others is admirable, but also looking after yourself is necessary. So as I mentioned, I've met a lot of people, a lot of first responders, not as mates at the coffee shop, but because I've been in the back of their ambulance or something like that. That's how I've had interactions with many of you. But I want a first responder who is coming to see me, whether it be a nurse or an ambo or somebody else, who is also looking after themselves. Because I know that if you're looking after yourself, you are going to be better to look after me. So please do put your oxygen mask on first, as I said. I'm sure you've heard that before. But if you haven't, last time you were on a plane, it always says put your oxygen mask on first, then help everyone else around you. You guys do a fantastic job at helping everybody else, but please remember to help yourselves too, because you're going to be better at whatever you're doing for people like me. So that's my Instagram if anyone is keen to stalk. But that is the final slide, and it's usually where we would go over to questions now, but obviously the setup's a little bit different this time. So did you have any questions at all? I think you're on mute.
I am, sorry, Lisa.
Ah, there you go.
So thank you so much, Lisa. What an incredibly inspiring story. We might just sort of end the share screen, and I'll just try and end that so we can.
There we go.
You are perfect. Thanks so much. So that we can have a bit of a chat. Well, Lisa's so inspirational. I think just listening to your story, there were so many elements of your physical journey, but as you alluded to so much, your emotional journey and a little bit about, the PTSD. I wondered if you could maybe speak a little bit to the role of distraction therapy.
Sure. Yeah, distraction therapy is wonderful. It's one of my tools that I use. So I have, to manage my chronic fatigue, my anxiety, my PTSD, things like that, I have had numerous interventions with medication and I've tried everything, almost everything. And then we came to the realization that the best way for me to manage things like chronic pain and anxiety and PTSD was good old distraction therapy. And the good thing about that is that firstly, it's really cheap, but you can tailor it to each individual. So for me, distraction therapy is my writing, playing with my puppy dog, who's so far been silently sitting here beside me. But for you or for somebody else, it may be doing the gardening or cooking or whatever it is. Those two things are my idea of hell. But distraction therapy is absolutely wonderful. And it's a bit of a catch-22, because we always say don't just push things under the rug and keep it a secret and don't tell anyone. But there are sometimes, in my experience anyway, when we really need to, I recognise the problems there, but I also recognise that things like medication and the other lifestyle interventions, sleep, food, not turning to alcohol, they're not working for me. What else have I got in my tool bag? And distraction therapy has certainly been one for me personally.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and I think you're so right in that sometimes it's not always about talking, especially when it's so heavy on you, that it is about being able to actually leave that and distract yourself for a while, with something that brings you joy, and that's so different. And then you have more strength to come back to whatever it is you need to work through and deal with.
That's right. Yeah, there's absolutely no weakness in putting up your hand and saying, I'm having a tough time, I'm struggling. Despite what the old school mentality may have been, there are some really bloody strong people. The strongest people I know are the ones who have put up their hand and gone, you know what, I'm struggling, I need help. I know bodybuilders and some really big guys at the gym, they got nothing. Seriously, it's my friends and colleagues with PTSD, mental health challenges, who would walk all over them any day. They're the strong ones.
Yeah. And it's that sense of resilience, that ability to come back from what life throws at you, and building that, I think, is like a fitness.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and coming from my own perspective, yes, but there's also science to support that the brain is a muscle, like every other muscle, needs to be worked, needs to be challenged. So yes, building that muscle, working on that muscle is absolutely important. But also, going back to the gym analogy, you can't just go to the gym 24/7. Your body needs rest in the same way your brain needs rest. And that's when maths or The Bachelor or really shitty reality TV comes in for me, but it may be something very different for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sailing, walking on the beach, anywhere near water for me is
Great.
Yeah. So you're so right, because it's such a unique combination and recipe for each individual person, that's so critical. Another question I have for you, Lisa, is within your story, and obviously you've spoken that you're not a first responder yourself, but what are some of the things that I think were really for you those aha moments where you realized that you had to pull yourself through that, and what the solutions you had to find for your own issues, be they physical or emotional? Can you maybe speak about some of those turning points for you and or solutions, and whether they were in fact aha moments or just realizations over time? Because I think that is different for different people as well.
Sure. Well, I suppose, first of all, I'll set the scene, give you some context. So I came out of the coma, and it wasn't for a couple of months until I started retaining memory. So I have amnesia, roughly 3 months before and after the brain hemorrhage. So when the specialist first told me my leg was going to be amputated, I cried my eyes out. Woke up the next morning, had completely forgotten. So my family decided they wouldn't turn it into Groundhog Day and tell me every single day, and they waited until I was a bit better. But I was really distraught when shit first hit the fan, let's put it that way, when I first became conscious or aware of what had happened. But I suppose one thing that I had in my favour, if you want to call it that, I played a lot of sport growing up, and I knew that when you're on, so volleyball was my thing, if that means anything to anyone. I knew that if I missed a ball, missed a point on that volleyball court, no amount of self-pity, sitting there feeling sorry for myself, going, poor me, wallowing in it, was going to change what had happened. I had to get up, get back on the horse, get my shit together, whatever you want to say, and get on with it. So that's really a similar approach that I took to hospital. I knew that no amount of sitting here being really shitty with the world was going to change what happened. And there are some absolutely horrible things that have happened in this world that I've only seen through a television screen, that some of you may have some more personal experience with, that reminding ourselves when anything goes wrong, what's happened has happened, but it's what you do after that really makes the change.
You're so right. And I think, we sort of also are exposed to stresses for such a long period of time, which is so different from just a sort of a once-off event, and very mindful within the first responders as well that they're continually faced with stresses, with challenges, with really confronting situations, and the impact that that might have on their well-being is sometimes very different from a one-off event. And so I wondered if you had any thoughts about that or anything to share, because it sounds like for you as well, there have been just such a series of events that have continued and do continue and build on each other. It's, you're living it every day.
That's right. There is no, this happened 16 years ago and it's all been okay since. It still happens all the time. I still have my triggers. An ambulance drove past me in the car the other day, and that's one of my triggers, to just have a few flashbacks and things like that. So it's different for everyone, but one of my personal strategies has been compartmentalizing all of those thoughts. So I save a spot in my brain for all of the bullshit thoughts that I have, and when I do have one, I park it in there. And I have another, I just park it in there. So I'm not just sticking it under the carpet and pretending it didn't happen. I'm recognizing it, saying, right, I've had that thought. I'm just going to park it over here for a moment and try. I suppose one of the things that did really help with that was seeing a specialist and learning about acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a form of psychology, and I certainly don't have that training, but getting that sort of help and learning that what's happened has happened, and I don't mean to minimize anything, but it's just knowing that it's there, it's just parked in my brain, but now is not the time to have a breakdown about it.
You're so right, because there's that compartmentalization which helps you cope in the immediate situation. Coming back to that in the right time, in the right forum where you feel supported is so critical.
Yes.
But while you're driving down the road, going into the fetal position because you've seen an ambulance, or going into shock and flashbacks can be dangerous. And so you're so right. It's dealing with it, but in the right time and place.
Yeah, and that's going to be different for everybody obviously. For me personally, it meant venting to my husband, and the poor guy had to just listen to me talk his ear off for half an hour. But other times I can get by just going to the gym and dealing with it on my own. For other circumstances, I did have to invest in a psychologist and get that extra help, I suppose, because my husband and my family, as much as I love them, they haven't got years of training and knowing about all these extra tools. So to all of you who are thinking that your poor spouse or your children will do fine, maybe that's the case, but don't underestimate how valuable some extra help can potentially be if you want to go down that path.
Absolutely. And they're so emotionally involved that sometimes it's very difficult for them to separate.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much. It's just been so incredible hearing your story, and I see so many learnings for first responders. Was there any sort of last words that you wanted to share before we finish up today?
I think I have probably covered most of it today. Just repeating myself that you are the strongest person in the room if you're putting your hand up and asking you for help. There should be no shame or stigma attached to doing that. Don't ever think there's a one size fits all. Whatever is working for you. If that's green tea, great. If that's your thing. But if that's at the other end of the spectrum and medication, great.
Going to the gym and boxing.
Yes, and thank you all for the wonderful, wonderful work you do. I say to all my surgeons and doctors, I love you, but I hope to never see you again. So one day we may meet, but I kind of hope not. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Lovely chatting to you today. Thank you for